Remnants of a Forgotten Past by Alban 55, Chapter 19, Bakaneko. A dim beam of light from the settling sun reflected a glow as she stood on her mother's plush carpet in the middle of the guest room. It accented her curves and would force the hormonal teenager in the room to take notice of her. That was surely enough. She could stand here, and Naruto would eventually lift his head to drink in every inch of her flawless body, but she preferred the more direct approach. She was feeling frisky after all. Why not enjoy what was going to happen, even as she milked him for everything he had, literally and figuratively, of course. She was on the hunt, and Naruto was vulnerable. She didn't know what had happened. The boy, from what she could tell, was a cheerful child, though currently teemed with insecurities. He had been yelling in delicious anguish and made a disaster zone out of his room, seemingly at the drop of a hat. It only fueled Cinder's lustful curiosity, add that much more. Naruto had not pulled himself from his pathetic little slump on the bed. He must have not noticed her yet. Strange, she had already called to him once she entered the room. What a cruel mistress despair could be, but to not even notice the form of the one standing directly before him. Cinder wasn't rebuked, however, when she failed to get his attention by standing there. She walked over to the bed slowly, put in a sachet with her wide hips with every step, having made it to bear her long legs with the dress she had picked out this morning. Naruto was sprawled out horizontally on the bed, a torn pillow clutched tightly in his grip as he buried his face in it. He had to have smelled her perfume now she was this close, and she suppressed a smirk when Naruto seemingly slightly tensed than he was a moment ago. Good, he had noticed her. Your secrets will be mine. You will be mine. Like a lost puppy bent to my every beck and call, she would take what was rightfully hers when she wanted, and all she had to do was be nice to him, and her prey would never know the difference. He would even be happy with it. Who wouldn't be? It was at that point that the young fall heiress laid down herself on the bed, her body parallel to Naruto's, and that was what got the boy to raise his head and look at her curiously. Cinder, he asked. Good. She could practically taste the despair in his voice. He sounded like a kicked puppy, and now that she finally got a good look at him up close, the hormonal infatuation for her hadn't decreased in the slightest. Vulnerable. What's wrong, Naruto? I hate to see my favorite boy so sad. She cooed, laying it on thick with the compliments just like she always did when she saw him. I hope we've been hospitable enough for you, she pouted, dare Naruto to prove her wrong. Whatever had been making Naruto so angry, those feelings evaporated after being confronted directly by his precious crush. His face was heated up when he realized how close she was to him. No, you and your mom have been incredible to me, he responded. Then what could be going on? You made a mess out of this room. Surely you must be upset about something. She gave a fox gasp. Don't tell me that you're lonely, feeling put out because you won't be seeing your friends for a while. His guard was lowered. Perfect. She had feigned innocence and deliberately started by asking him these non-loaded questions before going on. She needed him to be comfortable around her before she went in for the kill. No, that ain't it either. I mean, I'm bummed that Neptune and Arslan will be going off to Sanctum, and I won't be able to see them much, but I just learned some bad news. I won't be able to go home again. He was starting to reveal the cracks in his proverbial armor, but it would take a little more prodding on Cinder's part. He was trying to keep up the facade that he was a normal human being. Perhaps it was time to reveal to him that she already knew more than he anticipated. You poor boy, she said sickly. You don't have to be so distraught. You have a home here. I don't know much about where you come from, but it mustn't have been a fun place with the way you attract the grim. Naruto froze, looking into her amber eyes with a sense of trepidation. Something was off about the way Cinder was talking to him, but for some reason he couldn't muster up the emotion to care. His mind had been numb for a while, and now he was just listening to her without a care in the world. What are you talking about? The girl, Arslan, is quite talkative about these matters, it seems. That girl is a bad apple, having such a handsome, selfless friend risk his life for her, and in turn she turns out to fear him. It is quite tasteless. He hadn't even noticed how close their bodies were as Cinder had slinked her way into his very personal space. She raised her arms gently and wrapped her hands around his neck, holding Naruto close to her. The scent of perfume was overpowering now that he was essentially pressed into her bosom. Her skin was smooth, but the hands were cold and clammy on his neck. A little nagging voice of doubt blossomed in the back of his mind, but it was being quashed by the fluttering his heart was doing. He looked up, seeing Cinder's eyes filled with affection. Her hands tightened on the back of his neck before she leaned in and forcefully kissed him. Naruto's mind went blank and his body went rigid as Cinder leaned deeper into the kiss. A grown woman, one of the most beautiful women he had ever seen in his life, was kissing him. She was forceful and strong, taking the dominant role as she aggressively pushed into him, but her lips were soft and tender, and he felt himself numbly melting into the intimate gesture. The two of them fidgeted as she tried to get more comfortable. Cinder broke off the kiss to allow them both to breathe before adjusting herself and getting into another deep one right away. She slid the rest of her body. Her dress rubbed against the boy's jumpsuit, and she purposely and intentedly moved her thigh forward to rest elsewhere. Naruto wasn't oblivious to the machinations. His brain was an addled mix of confusion and pleasure and hormones and maybe a little fear, and he couldn't help but give in a bit to desire. Cinder broke the kiss and smiled at him, and although Naruto didn't miss the lack of authenticity in it, he was too busy. He was too much of a mess of emotions to react. Cinder pushed her thigh against him, apparently pleased with herself. "Do you like that, Naruto? Do you like me?" she asked. Naruto merely sat there dumbfounded as the kiss stopped, but now she was kneeing him where her thigh. "Does this make you feel good, Naruto?" Naruto didn't watch her, but he could feel her stop rubbing. Her other hand came over to join its twin. Naruto's mind went numb to what happened next, but a weight pressed down on him and snapped him back to reality when he realized that a grown woman was now startling him with a knowing look in her eyes. Drinking it all in, he lied on his back and stared at the ceiling, his face beat red with embarrassment and focused on his exhilarated breathing. His leg hairs stood on end, and when there was a sudden shock of cold air hitting his legs and the sound of fabric hitting the floor, followed by the shuffling of some sort of fabric. He dared to take a peek upwards, and his eyes nearly bugged out at what he was witnessing. Cinder's elegant red dress was falling over her shoulders, revealing her creamy, flawless skin. The nude woman leaned forward, her large breast encompassing Naruto's vision before she raised the finger to her lips and gave a low hush. She then slunk off of him, her head moving down further. She broke her gaze with him, tilting her face downwards. Naruto watched her, but didn't understand what she was doing until a shock of sensation came over him. But it was short-lived, and under a minute later, Cinder was staring him in the eyes again, a thin rivulet of drool running out of her mouth. "Do you want more? Do you want to have more of my body? We can do this every day, as long as you do one little thing for me," she whispered in his ear, her arms once again wrapping around his neck, and her breasts pressed themselves against him as the aggressive woman continued to take charge. She took his silence as an opportunity to continue. "Tell me your secret. What power are you hiding under that young visage? Why do you attract the grim? Tell me your secret, and I will give you everything you ever wanted," she said, her voice husky but not at the thought at what was about to occur. The lust for power in her eyes was obvious to Naruto even in his dazed state. There was a prick of her fingernails, drew blood digging into his shoulder as she pushed down on him more forcefully than she had up to that point. Naruto thrust upwards, his daze broken as he registered what was happening. The woman before him was forcing herself on him. She was interested in the Kyuubi. She had made that perfectly clear, but framed it in a seductive way, using her good looks and his complicated feelings for her to try and manipulate him. "Now," she breathed. Let me make you mine," she finished, as she slowly lowered herself onto Naruto, digging into his back as she pushed herself onto him. Naruto pushed back harder, his brain all light with fury at the forceful attempts as all affection for Cinder abandoned his mind. His face contorted into a sneer, his eyes burned blood red, and his cheek marks deepened. Cinder was in nirvana, focused on her task at hand and blissfully unaware until a powerful punch hit her in the jaw, more powerful than anything that had ever struck her. Two white dots that Naruto recognized as teeth flew flew past his vision as the naked woman was sent hurtling from the bed and off him. Naruto pulled up his boxers and wrapped his jumpsuit around himself, claws digging into the fabric. Cinder had crashed into the wall, slumped over as she hit the ground. She lay there motionless, naked as a jaybird. Then Naruto wondered if he had knocked her out until a guttering snarl emanated from her throat. You hit me! You hit me in my beautiful face! She lifted her head up, her pupils dilated as she stared at Naruto with a look that promised death. If he wasn't so furious, he may have been enlightened to care. You stupid boy, I could have given you everything, and you spit in my face. You could have been happy and fruitful by my side, as you did my bidding completely blissful. Naruto growled, offended by Cinder's delusions of grandeur and lust for power with his Biju's chakra fueling his anger. Cinder got to her feet, staring at her reflection in one of the windows. Her jaw dropped as she gingerly raised a hand up to her to touch the bruises where Naruto had struck her. He had punched clean through her aura like it was a wet tissue. Cinder was slowly backing away, having entered the room without her weapons. Naruto wasn't done glaring at her angrily, though. A fire erupted in his belly that allowed him to momentarily forget the self-pitying slump that he had left so vulnerable to Cinder machinations in the first place. I want power, and you're going to give me that power, Cinder accused. But Naruto had risen from the bed and stood up, his clothes torn and hanging off him, revealing the mesh undershirt and Tsunadi's necklace. His previous hot anger had boiled over into a cool rage as he took slow, methodical steps towards Cinder. The QB's red chakra still surrounded him like a shroud, the wild undulations revealing Naruto's anger when his body and expression would not. Are you going to kill me? Me, the beautiful only daughter of the Fall family. Men throw themselves at me just to get a chance that I'll look at them. But you had to be a selfish brat. Whatever power you have is wasted on the likes of you. It belongs to me. You'd be better off making me powerful. A kunai embedded itself in the wall behind Cinder and cut her off in the strongest throw Naruto had ever made in his life, creating a small cut on Cinder's face in the exact same place where he had punched her. You're fucking pathetic, Naruto said. Cinder went rigid, her face sneering and her pupils dilating as something within her seemed to snap even more than she already had. Not only do you strike me, but you cut me. And she seemed even more furious for a moment, but as she finally registered what he said, her mouth morphed into a twisted sneer. They'll never believe you. You can't touch me because you've grown fond of my mother. Who is everyone going to believe? The dumb kid who just rolled into town, or the heiress to the nobility that everyone adores? I could have you chased out of the kingdom right now. Naruto halted, and he matched Cinder's sneer. Kill me, and the kingdom will be out for your blood. You bitch. I wanted to be nice to you, but you're making it very difficult. Now you will tell me about this wonderful power that you have gracefully put on display for me, or I will go to authorities and weave a tale of the misfit boy who dared lay a hand on Mystial's gem. What will it be? Keep living the luxurious life, or be forced to run away lest you rot in a jail cell? A place where I'll be away from you, and where this sweet, sweet power that you want so badly will be out of your reach. Naruto spat, placing a hand on his seal for emphasis. Cinder's face fell. You little brat! You seem real intent on getting on my bad side, she roared, face twisting into such a scowl that it made the normally beautiful woman look repugnant. He had called Cinder's bluff, and Cinder had backed him into a corner with her influence. It was a statement that 18th month ago, Naruto would have already thrown consequences to the wind and rushed the woman. Get the hell out of here, Naruto demanded. You'll wish you never crossed me, brat. At your most vulnerable, I will be there, and I will be a lot less friendly. I will force you to the ground and make you lick my feet before you submit that damn power of yours to me. Cinder hadn't brought her weapon, and Naruto could tell she was entirely confident in beating him even if she had, especially if he was using the zero-tailed state. She slowly backed out of the room after pulling up her dress and making herself decent, leaving Naruto to stew in his anger and disgust by himself in the ruined room. Tensions ran high in the household from that point on, though the head herself seemed blissfully unaware of what was transpiring between her daughter and the boy she was sponsoring for tournaments. Part of Naruto was worried that she would just out him as the one who had punched her, spinning some woven tale about how she was the victim of an assault, but that never happened, and Naruto didn't have to hightail it out of there. They had coexisted toxically for some time after the incident in a cold war of sorts, both brewing in their anatomy for the other. From what he could tell, the only reason Cinder hadn't outed him was because she was still curious about the power that slept deep within him that she wanted to use for herself. Ever since the hostile warning, Naruto had been on edge, sleeping with one eye open, wondering what Cinder was going to do to make good on her promise. Luckily, they didn't interact much. Naruto was usually in the servants' quarters, having meals with them, while Cinder had her meals in the formal dining room with her mother. That morning, though, was a little bit different. Tremaine had invited him to breakfast that day, the day he would have his first tournament match. The 14-year-old sat as far away from Cinder as humanly possible. Throughout all of this, Tremaine seemed remarkably oblivious of the rift that had formed. She asked Naruto if he was excited for the first match, like any good caretaker would, and when the tense breakfast was finally over, Naruto couldn't wait to get out of the house. "Thank you for the meal, mother," Cinder said in such a clipped and distrustful tone that he doubted anyone that heard would feel that she truly appreciated it. After that, she got up from the breakfast table without any word, face set into a deep scowl as she disappeared to do God's knew what. "That girl, I swear," Tremaine said, shaking her head as one of the servants took her finished plate from her. She turned to the boy who remained at her table. "Don't you think it's time for you to get going? I'll be watching from the box seats with some of the other nobles. Knocking dead. Not literally, of course," the noblewoman said. The two of them left the house not long after that. Tremaine's damper mood over her daughter seemingly to fade as they got out into the morning air. When they arrived at the arena, she bid Naruto farewell at an elevator that would take her to her suite, where she would mingle with all the other nobles. Naruto, on the other hand, was directed straight to the locker room by arena personnel. He couldn't help but feel butterflies rise in his stomach, even if he had been in this scenario before at the Chunin exams. This arena was a lot bigger than the one in Konoha, and already the people were filling into their seats hours before the matching began. He sat by himself in the locker room with the other fighters as he pulled his clothes on. He loved his orange jumpsuit, but honestly, he was glad to be out of those since he had been wearing the same ones for weeks on end. The moment he was taken into Tremaine's custody, he was all but forced to get a new set of clothes. His combat uniform was an orange tailcoat with multiple black lines etched into the fabric like a spiderweb. It fit comfortably but snugly on his body and allowed for quite a bit of breathability. As he got dressed, he would occasionally steal glances around at the other people in the room, and he noticed some of them were doing the same. It was actually quite the colorful mix of characters, with some of the people here being older than he expected. Most of the people here weren't as rough looking as the average shinobi, but that didn't stop the majority of them giving him the evil eye as he went about his business. He felt someone tap him on his right shoulder and immediately turned to his left. He wasn't going to fall for that old trick, and he leveled a glare at the person next to him who did it. The first thing he noticed was that it wasn't the finger that had poked him, but instead a tail. A monkey faunus 3 lockers down had reached across his shoulder and tried to prank him. "Damn, you're good." The cheeky grin on his face even reminded him of a monkey as the fauna still swung back around from where he had come. Upon closer look, the boy seemed even younger than himself, around the age where he would just be starting combat school akin to Neptune and Arslan. Some of the older and definitely more experienced tournament vets started to mumble to themselves under their breaths, no doubt less than flattering things. "Haven't seen those two around before. Rookies for the new season, probably. They ain't the only ones. Wonder which of them will get weeded out before all is said and done." A bell rang out in the locker room, signifying the time of registration. Naruto slammed his locker door shut, attaching his weapon pouch to his hip as he walked past the monkey faunus. He gave the shinobi a cheeky grin, but because of Naruto's nerves, he didn't return it. He didn't know why he was having such an aversion to Sun's personality and his harmless prank. The waiting room was just as tense as the locker room, if not more. As a rookie, he had gone through orientation a while back, where the arena officials explained the rules to him. The regional tournament were split into 3 different classifications, based on the frequency of the events and the prestige. Each one had its own set of rules and numbers of draws, from 8 to 64 participants. D1 tournaments were the annual and semi-annual galas that attracted the nobility and scouts from the Huntsman academies. He would be starting in D3. The qualifications, should he earn his keep in D3 tournaments, he could be dumped up into the standard D2 tournaments. The draw were made up once the deadline for registration passed, and once the day of the tournament, the draw would be put on a hologram monitor in the waiting room while the first match proceeded. The participants could view the match on the screen next to the draw while they waited for their match. Naruto was currently doing just that, watching the first match go underway while he waited for his turn. He only watched the first match half-heartedly, not really paying attention to who was on screen. That seemed to be the case with the other fighters that had taken to stay in the waiting room. Instead, their eyes were trained on a holographic display next to the one showing the D3 tournament they were to participate in. This opposing footage was of a D1 tournament going on concurrently in another arena. The bout going on there was apparently interesting enough for these fighters to and at everything that happened. When Naruto turned to look at the screen for the very first time, his eyes met with a flash of red and gold, and he found out why everyone was so enraptured by the fight going on. The D1 tournament was showing a fight between a burly man with a hammer and a tall girl who looked to be about his age. The man was pretty unremarkable, other than his size, but the girl had brilliant red hair and was dressed in equally beautiful golden armor, and that was just her appearance. The way she moved on the battlefield couldn't help but draw eyes onto her. It was like she and her opponent were in an interpretative dance as they sashayed across the battlefield, her reaction perfectly to her opponent's rhythm while somehow still being in complete control of the fight. There was something about this that Naruto couldn't place, some kind of trick to what the girl was doing. The audience on the screen watching the fight seemed just as amazed, but when the girl finally took down her opponent, it erupted into a mountain of cheers. The girl gave a kind, if not bashful smile and put away her weapon, a magnificent golden javelin. She then bowed to her opponent and to the crowd, staring into the camera and giving a smile that made a celebrity. He hadn't even been paying attention, and when Naruto snapped out of his surroundings, he realized that the roar of his own crowd was getting louder. 2 fighters had already been called while he was standing around watching. One by one, the fighters in the waiting room dwindled as they were called in pairs up to the main stage over the loudspeaker, with the numbers decreasing. The tension in the room continued to mount with the remaining fighters. All of that was lost on the monkey boy he had encountered earlier, especially when his name was called. He bounded to the elevator the moment his name was called with way too much energy. It once again reminded Naruto of himself before all this nonsense. His memories told him he was a prankster, headstrong and talkative, but in the short weeks he had been here, it seemed like he was slowly losing himself. It scared him. It was almost like the thought of not being himself anymore, the personality shift, the random memories from someone else in his mind, the emotional instability and mood swings, and no doubt the baggage from what happened with Cinder. He felt lost even in his own mind. This place, I can't stay here. No matter what, I have to get back, and then everything will be back to normal. Over the loudspeaker, his name was called. Yujito looked out the windows as the airship brought the students down on the campus ground for the first day of back to school. As the deputy headmistress, she was supposed to teach combat classes. The thought of teaching these kids didn't exactly excite her, but to keep up pretense of normal life, she had read the curriculum and knew what to expect. She was only annoyed at the fact that she couldn't spend all her time poring over her true objective. The transformed Kunoichi took one final look at the empty halls before they would be flooded with students. Daily meetings with her boss had gotten nowhere, and eavesdropping had yielded no fruit yet. She certainly hadn't come here to teach, but she didn't actually have much information on what she was looking for. She knew the circumstances in which she found herself in from conversation with her Bijou. All of a sudden, she was saddled with the most difficult mission of her life, one not even assigned to her by Kumugakure, and yet one that had the odds stacked against her the most. Her encounter with the fellow Jinchuriki Han in the countryside confirmed what she needed to do. The Gobai Jinchuriki had creeped her out, emotionless and clad in his mushroom-like armor, but his eyes spoke of experience, and he told her what was what. He was very cryptic about it, but she knew now that in this future world's kingdoms were harboring a powerful secret brotherhoods, conspiracies, and most importantly, in ancient power. To make a long story short, Vegito knew that the interconnected governments and schools were hiding a great secret, and this great secret was something that an opposing faction and the Huntsman Academies were fighting over. That was all that Han had told her. Despite traveling with a woman that had once been very closely knit with these matters, that was apparently all he knew at the moment. Today was her first opportunity to butter herself up to her new boss, and then maybe he would start slowly revealing his secrets to her. A little bit of eavesdropping could go a long way too. She rapped on the door to Professor Lionheart's office as her ears picked up the sound of another airship landing on the campus grounds with what was no doubt another group of students. "Come in," a muffled male voice said from the other side of the door. Yujiro gave a light smirk before turning the knob and entering the headmaster's office. Her new boss was seated at his desk, poring over his paperwork. She would have to interact with him daily if she was to get closer to her goal, but how to do without arousing suspicion? She was impersonating the headmistress of the academy. Who's to say that she wasn't already in on whatever conspiracy was happening in this world's schools? "Ah, Professor Liddell, it is good to see you back on the school grounds. If this is about the weekly meetings, I'm afraid that I've moved them to Thursday instead this semester." "Ah, yes, of course, sir," Yujiro said, just going along with the conversation. She could only pick up so much on Liddell's personality from gleaming the personal items she had written in her room, but she imitated her the best she could, and hopefully it would be enough to fool these non-shinobi. Lionheart didn't seem to notice at first glance, but she could not slip up. "Is there anything you wanted?" "Ah, yes, I want to talk to you about the special information," and she said. Lionheart's eyes widened with surprise for a moment before he folded his hands on his desk. "Ah, yes, I'm sorry I couldn't have given you enough time to process that information. I'm sure you couldn't probably prepare your lesson plans after hearing it. I thought you were too young to become a member of the Special Order, but Osman appeared to believe otherwise." "Yes, it was all very much to take in. I didn't think much things could exist in this world. An all too common reaction. I know it was mine when I first got roped into this. Our enemies. They are dormant at the moment, but that does not mean that Salem isn't planning every single step to secure the relics. She will use any means to try and divide us. We don't know who be coming out of the woodwork on her side, but the Spring Maiden disappeared years ago, and we have no idea if or when the others will be attacked." Yujiro didn't do anything other than nod obediently, for it turned out that she really was in on the inner circle of these conspiracies, as Yujiro suspected she might be. Lionheart was giving her information on a silver platter. The only thing missing was context. Salem was obviously the name of some enemy of these schools and governments. Relics were the item that Salem was seeking. For what reason, Yujiro didn't know. Maidens had some role in this all, but they were a means to an end in order to get the so-called relics. She was getting the information, but she still didn't have the context she needed in order to piece everything together. Patience was a virtue, and she had all the time in the world to subtly squeeze information out of this hitmaster. "Well, I'd better not take up more of your time," Yujiro said. "Have a long day of lessons to teach her now that the students are back. Have a good day, Professor Lionheart." Lionheart didn't seem to suspect a thing so far. Likewise. End of chapter 19.